I signed the papers and handed over every penny of my life savings without saying a single word. My mother smirked across the restaurant table, raising her wine glass to toast my father while they whispered about how naive I was. They thought they'd backed me into a corner, using my name to open fraudulent credit cards and draining $120,000 from my personal bank account right under my nose. Everyone in my family called me soft, assuming I'd just cry, take the debt, and move on to protect their reputation. But as the waiter placed the final bill on our table, my father handed me his pen and said, "Sign it, honey. It's family business." I smiled, picked up my phone, and pressed play on the projector behind them. The room went silent. My father's face turned ghostly white, and that's when they realized I didn't just know their secret. I was about to ruin them. My name is Elena. I'm 28 years old, working as a senior software engineer, and for as long as I can remember, my life's main objective was simple: by my parents' approval. Growing up, my parents, Richard and Eleanor, were the absolute gold standard in our affluent neighborhood. My father carried himself like a Fortune 500 CEO, and my mother never left the house without looking like she stepped off a magazine cover. To the outside world, we were the picture-perfect, high-achieving family living in a sprawling suburban estate. But behind closed doors, that perfection was a carefully maintained illusion built on fragile glass. I worked 80 hours a week, saved every spare dollar, and lived frugally just to prove I could stand on my own 2 feet. Last month, I finally decided it was time to buy my very first home, a quiet, modest townhouse near the city. I submitted my mortgage application with complete confidence, knowing my income was solid and my financial record was spotless. 2 days later, my loan officer called. His tone was cold, almost accusatory. He told me my application was instantly flagged and denied. Confused, I pulled my full credit report and my blood ran cold. According to the banks, I was over $300,000 in default across 4 maxed-out credit cards, 2 personal luxury car loans, and a massive private lien. Someone had been using my name, my credit, and my identity since the exact day I turned 18. I sat in my car outside the bank for nearly an hour, staring at the thick stack of financial statements with my hands shaking uncontrollably. I hired a forensic fraud investigator the very next morning, desperate to believe there had been some catastrophic administrative mistake. But as the investigator peeled back layer after layer of digital paper trails, the horrifying reality began to focus with terrifying clarity. The identity thief wasn't some anonymous hacker operating from halfway across the globe. The fraudulent credit cards, the luxury vehicle loans, and the maxed-out lines of credit had all been opened from the IP address of my childhood home. My parents had used my social security number the minute I turned 18, turning my pristine credit into their personal, endless piggy bank to maintain their lavish lifestyle, pay for elite country club memberships, and lease high-end European sedans they couldn't actually afford. Then came the sharpest dagger of all. While digging through my primary high-yield savings account, funds I had sacrificed my weekends, holidays, and social life to build over 6 years, I discovered a massive wire transfer executed 3 weeks prior. $120,000 was completely gone, swept directly into a joint account managed by my mother. When I called her, keeping my voice carefully measured, I simply asked if she knew why my savings account had been accessed. My mother didn't even pause or stumble. Her tone turned instantly icy, weaponizing a calculated mixture of disgust and patronizing superiority. She accused me of being ungrateful, selfish, and paranoid, reminding me of everything they sacrificed to raise me. She warned me that if I dared make an issue out of family finances, she would ensure the entire extended family knew what a cold, vindictive daughter I had turned out to be. I knew confronting them directly with emotions or tears would get me nowhere. They were masters of manipulation, and as long as they believed they held the upper hand, they would simply spin the narrative against me. I needed absolute proof, something so undeniable that no amount of guilt-tripping could erase it. Instead of panicking, I spent 3 sleepless nights, sifting through every piece of paper I could find, retrieving archived mail and tax documents from our shared family storage unit. What I uncovered went far beyond simple identity theft or stolen savings. Tucked inside an old tax folder was a series of hidden offshore bank transfers and legal incorporation documents. My parents hadn't just used my name for credit cards, they had quietly registered a shell company under my name 3 years ago. Through this shell company, they had been systematically embezzling funds from a regional community charity foundation where my father served as board treasurer. Hundreds of thousands of dollars had been laundered through accounts bearing my signature, completely forged by my mother's hand. They weren't just living off my hard work. They had intentionally structured their financial crimes so that if the federal auditors ever knocked on the door, I would be the one facing criminal charges while they walked away clean. The cold realization washed over me. To my own parents, I wasn't a daughter. I was a shield and a scapegoat. That was the precise moment my heartbreak hardened into quiet, lethal focus. When my father texted me later that evening, inviting me to a family reconciliation dinner to sign some final debt settlement papers, I didn't refuse. I replied instantly with a single word: absolutely. The venue my parents chose was Le Petit Jardin, an outrageously overpriced French restaurant in the heart of downtown. My father had booked the private glass dining room, the kind reserved for high society celebrations and corporate executives. When I walked in, I was greeted by a room full of familiar faces, my aunts, uncles, and several influential family friends my father had invited to celebrate his upcoming early retirement. My parents were in their absolute element, holding court at the head of the table. My mother wore a new diamond necklace, bought, no doubt, with my stolen savings, and my father beamed as he poured vintage champagne for everyone. The moment they saw me, their faces shifted into synchronized masks of warm, parental affection. My mother rushed over, pulling me into a tight, theatrical hug that smelled suffocatingly of expensive perfume, whispering sharply into my ear, "Be quiet, sit down, and don't make a scene." Throughout the meal, they treated me like a naive child who had finally come to her senses. My father dropped subtle, passive-aggressive remarks about how young people nowadays don't understand the complex burdens of managing family wealth. Every smile felt like a threat, and every toast felt like a victory lap over my stolen future. As dessert was served, the laughter around the table quieted down. My father set his glass on the tablecloth, reached inside his tailored jacket, and pulled out a thick leather folder. He slid it across the white linen right in front of my plate, followed by a heavy gold pen. He smiled smugly, his eyes cold as steel, and leaned in close enough so only the surrounding family could hear. "Sign it, honey," he said with fake gentleness. "It's a standard non-disclosure and debt assumption agreement. It settles our little family business." I stared down at the crisp white pages of the agreement. The document essentially demanded that I take full legal and financial responsibility for every maxed-out credit card, every fraudulent loan, and every missing dollar from the charity foundation, all in exchange for staying in their will. My father sat back, swirling his scotch, completely convinced he had backed me into a corner. My mother gave a patronizing sigh, nudging the gold pen closer to my hand. I picked up the pen, looked my father dead in the eye, and clicked it closed. "No," I said, my voice echoing clearly across the private room. My mother's smile instantly vanished. "Elena, don't be ridiculous," she snapped under her breath. "Sign the paper and stop being so dramatic in front of everyone." "I don't think I will," I replied calmly. Before my father could explode, I pulled my phone from my purse and tapped a single icon. Across the room, the wall-mounted media screen, the one the restaurant used for business presentations, flickered to life. The room fell dead silent as high-resolution images filled the screen. First came the bank records, glowing red-line items showing $120,000 wired directly from my personal savings into my mother's account. Next were the forgery reports, detailing the exact dates my social security number was used from their home IP address. But the real blow came last. An audio file began playing through the room's speakers, a crystal-clear recording of my parents from 2 nights ago, discussing how they would use my signature on the shell company documents to ensure I took the fall if federal auditors ever investigated the charity. My father's face turned from flushed red to ghostly white. My mother gasped, dropping her wine glass onto the table. where it shattered, soaking the white linen in red liquid. My aunts and uncles watched the screen in absolute horror, looking back and forth between the cold, hard evidence and the two fraud artists sitting at the head of the table. The illusion of the perfect family had completely shattered into dust. As the audio finished playing, the silence in the room was deafening. My father opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. His air of arrogance had completely evaporated. My mother sat frozen, staring at the screen while my relatives began whispering in disgust, unable to process the sheer magnitude of the betrayal. I reached into my bag and pulled out 2 manila envelopes. I slid one across the table to my father's attorney, who was sitting 2 chairs down looking utterly horrified. "That's a formal notice of criminal identity theft, bank fraud, and embezzlement," I said, my voice steady and unwavering. The Financial Crimes Division and federal charity auditors were handed these exact files an hour before I walked into this restaurant. My mother burst into panicked tears, begging me to reconsider and calling me heartless, but I didn't feel a single drop of guilt. I stood up, picked up my purse, and looked at the 2 people who had spent a decade using me as their personal bank account. "The dinner is on you," I said softly, "just like the rest of the bill." I turned and walked out of Le Petit Jardin, leaving behind the chaos I had carefully orchestrated. Over the next 3 months, their world completely unraveled. Faced with overwhelming evidence, my parents were forced to sell their sprawling estate and luxury vehicles to pay back the stolen charity funds and settle their massive debts. Criminal charges were officially filed, stripping them of their social standing, their wealth, and the fake reputation they had spent a lifetime building on my back. Walking out of that restaurant was the hardest thing I've ever done, but it was also the moment I finally reclaimed my life. Without the weight of my parents' manipulation holding me down, I worked alongside forensic accountants to clear my name, erase every trace of fraudulent debt from my record, and restore my credit score. Today, I'm sitting in the living room of my very own home, a beautiful townhouse paid for through my own honest hard work, filled with peace instead of fear. Cutting ties with family is never easy, but toxic bloodlines should never give anyone permission to destroy your future. You owe yourself protection, truth, and peace above all else. Now, I'm curious about what you would do. If you were in my shoes, would you have exposed them publicly at that dinner or handled it quietly through the court system? Comment your city and your thoughts below. I read every single response.